Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 42. It's been a long road, brought to you by Black Belt Magazine. And today we are here with one of the most exciting guests that we've had, somebody who's a huge inspiration for me that I've looked up to for a long time, both in martial arts and in business. We have Master Herb Perez, Olympic gold medalist from the Barcelona Olympics in 1992 in Tae Kwon Do, an absolute legend. It is an honor to have him on the show. So, Master Perez, maybe you just want to introduce yourself a little bit and tell us your martial arts journey. How did you get started, and tell us about those early years?
Well, thank you so much, but the intro was way too kind. It's always been my honor and pleasure to see you work and certainly use your programs in my school. I think it's amazing. For me, as most people know by now, I hope, and many people may forget, I was the 1992 Olympic gold medalist in Barcelona, and I had won a bunch of stuff before that, but quite honestly, the most significant thing probably was the Olympics, at least in the eyes of everyone that I meet currently, because it's an amazing opportunity. It was an amazing day and a wonderful culmination to a career that spanned a few years or so. I started in the martial arts, though, as a result of different reasons. I wasn't trying to be an Olympic gold medalist. I was trying to survive my area where I grew up in New York City and areas like that. So I had wandered past a martial arts facility, and it was a small sign on the door, said Tae Kwon Do, and I was being chased by a local group of kids. And I promised myself, as soon as I stopped running, I would run back to the school, which I did. And I did it as a result of reading a book. I had read this book called The Son of the Flying Tiger. And in it, it was a martial arts tournament, kind of like Enter the Dragon. And I liked the Tae Kwon Do character because he was very strong, had amazing kicks, and I thought he was really admirable. So I wandered back up to the school. As I went upstairs, my future instructor looked at me and said, "Well, your hair is too long, you're too short, and you're not flexible enough. You'll never be any good." So I was like, "Well, thank you, sir, but I kind of need Tae Kwon Do." So he said, "Well, your mother has to sign you up. It's $4 a class." So I said, "Well, she's downstairs, and can I take it downstairs?" So I took the application downstairs and signed myself into the class and took money from my paper route to join the class, and that's how I ended up starting Tae Kwon Do.
That's a really cool story. And one thing, I was talking to Chip Townsend last week, the breaking legend. He actually had kind of a similar story in the sense that in so many martial artists, they deal with this bullying, and that's kind of the early inspiration to kind of go on and learn how to defend yourself and learn how to stand up for yourself. And so it's interesting to hear that your journey kind of started in a similar fashion. So at what point, because you even said, I never thought that I'd be an Olympian. At what point, maybe talk about getting into competition and Tae Kwon Do tournaments and starting sparring and things like that. But then at what point along that path did you realize I could go to the Olympics? I could do this?
So what happened is I was fortunate, and I think so much of life is opportunity, the opportunities that present themselves. So when I went, the particular school that I wandered into was a competition school, because back then kids weren't being brought to martial arts schools to learn life skills. They weren't being brought to martial arts schools. Adults were going into schools to learn how to fight, and it was kind of a tough place to be. In our school, there were only 20 to 25 members, and the very first day you showed up, you fought. And if you came back, then you got taught. So the first day I showed up, I was doing leg swings across the wall, and next thing you know, I was fighting. And I liked it. I didn't like the part where I wasn't really good at it, but I liked the idea of it. And next thing I knew, I was in a tournament, because our school had a big tournament every year. And I just happened to come at a time when there was a tournament, and I was a yellow belt, and I lost third place, got fourth place, but I had fought 7 matches to get to fourth place. And I liked it. So I kept competing. And every tournament after that, I took first place until green belt, which I took third place. Then I took first place. And that was pretty much the pattern all the way up to black belt. Along the way, I realized that the type of fighting that I liked, because I was competing both in Tae Kwon Do tournaments, and then I was training in full contact Tae Kwon Do, which is the Olympic style. And I liked that better. When I was competing in that, I was a green belt and I won. And it was the first time my instructor had ever said, "Good job." Like he just kind of looked at me and said, "Good job." And that was like it. That was like the most he had ever said to me um, about anything. And so I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So then I went on to trying to compete at the state championships. And so I won those, and I showed up at the national championships for the Olympic sport of Tae Kwon Do, first time in 1981 or 82. And if you didn't compete at the qualifier, you had to show up in the open division and win. So I showed up in the open division and won. And then I went to the qualifier and won a couple of matches. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And this was at the time when they were trying to get Taekwondo to be in the 84 Olympics. And that didn't happen for a bunch of reasons, but then it was in the 88 Olympics. So at that moment, I realized that there were many things that I tried in life. I didn't always succeed at first, but if I stayed the course, I did. And so I decided at that moment, I had always wanted to go to the Olympics. And I guess that's probably the better part of the story. I was a young kid and I was watching the American Olympic team march into the stadium with the flag. And I was like, wow, I'd really like to be the guy carrying the flag. And much as I'd watched the moon launch and I wanted to be the guy going into outer space, and much as I had seen a band and I wanted to be the Beatles, I wanted to be that guy. Out of all those things, I've only not done one thing yet, and that's go to outer space, although there are many who would send me there. But the Olympic thing was as early as when I was 4. I must have been 4 or 5, 4, and watching them carry the flag into the Olympic Stadium. Taekwondo then started becoming mainstream on the Olympic path, certainly by 84, 85. You knew it was possible. I then made the US team and competed internationally, won the collegiates, won the nationals, won the team trials, competed internationally in 86, won the World Cup, beat the Korean in 87, first American to do that. And then I realized at that moment that it was not only possible, but it was probable. I had a slight sidestep. It took me to 92 to get there, but you know, it is what it is.
Absolutely. That's an awesome story. And just kind of I think the one thing that every martial artist can respect is the growth of a martial artist, especially in kind of those early stages of your career when, you know, you're in those 20s, 30s. How old were you when you went to the Olympics?
I was 32, you know, and I should have gone for all intents and purposes in 88. But it was happenstance and better for me to be in 92. But I think you're right. I think it's all about opportunity and how you take it. And I think these are amazing times for that reason, because most of us got involved in martial arts because of either personal challenges, safety, desire. We just liked it, and you know, an affiliation, an acclamation to the art. But most of us stay for different reasons. And then those of us who choose to teach, you know, I never wanted to teach. I came to a realization that I wanted to teach later, teach for different reasons. And now we have the greatest test of our lifetimes, because right now it's difficult to practice, it's difficult to train, it's difficult to teach, it's difficult to make a living in this sport. And rather than complain about it, you know, the better martial artists are just kind of hunkering down and getting the job done and doing what's necessary to get through the storm. And I think that's really going to be the ultimate, when this chapter is written, it'll be the ultimate test of what we talk about, which is what we did during this period of time to ensure that we would be able to continue to do what we do.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking more about kind of the situation that everybody is in kind of as we get deeper into the podcast. But absolutely, the perseverance that we learn as martial artists. And the point that I was going to make is those golden years of martial arts training that I'm very fortunate to kind of just now be getting into at the age of 22. You mentioned, climbing the ranks and winning these tournaments and realizing this transition from possible to probable. I love that word choice, kind of in your 20s and going into your early 30s. And the reason I specify that specific time period is because, I've met so many martial arts masters that, that they always tell me about, like, oh, I wish I could do this like I could when I was 25 or when I was 28. And so as a martial artist, it's important to cherish. If you are somebody that's lucky enough to be in my situation where you're kind of going into that time period, make sure that you cherish every moment and every memory that you make, because one day your focus will shift from creating those moments to helping others create those moments, right? And that's one of the things I think is so special about what we do. Speaking of special moments in what we do, we're going to get to the part of the show that I think that everybody watching is most eagerly anticipating, and that is take us to 1992, take us to Barcelona. What was it like from the time you landed in Spain all the way up until you're on that podium and hearing the anthem?
So I think, the learning moment the good news is by the time I had gotten to 92, I had the requisite amount of experience and knowledge and ability, and had experienced both winning and losing on great and grand levels. And at that moment, there's a certain amount of freedom that you're given to win or lose. And the words that I always remember, one of the greatest pieces of advice I had been given was by a gentleman out of Maryland, Gentle East Martial Arts. His name is John Holloway. And he was the U.S. team captain. He had fought in the first or second world championships, both in ITF and WTF. And he was a man I respected a lot because he was one of the first U.S. team captains. And I became a U.S. team captain for 8 years. He said to me, as I was getting ready to go to Barcelona, he was like, just have fun. He said, this is going to be an opportunity that you'll never see again. Enjoy it, win, lose, or draw, and have fun, and you'll win. And it was an interesting release for competition, because the reality is that if you can just release yourself to have fun and enjoy what you do, then your performance is ultimately better, and much better than most, if not all. When I went to Barcelona, I had the good fortune to make the team. One of my, a lot of your friends are trying to make the team, and they don't make the team. 4 of us were fortunate enough to win. I had beaten everybody in my weight division every year for 8 years. But anything can happen, but I was lucky and had a great performance. One of my best friends and training partners didn't make the team, so I had to release that part of it from it. And then I had 3 teammates that I had been on the team with for a number of years, but the one individual who had beaten my friend was on the team as well. And so I took him under my wing, and made sure that his Olympic experience was the best it could ever be. And he was my training partner, James Villasana, just an amazing young man. We had been on a team the year before as well. So when we got to Barcelona, I was team captain, and comes with a lot of responsibility. And we were in Barcelona for quite some time, and I had been there a few times before. And we were training 6 to 8 hours a day still. So I would go, and remembering the words of my coach and my captain, I would train as hard as I could. But then when it was time to relax, I relaxed. But my relaxation took a different form. I would look around Barcelona a little bit, enjoy food, and I would watch the fights of my competitors. So they had a library of past Olympic performances and world championships. So I would watch their matches to see how they fought. And I was always preparing. But I was also relaxed because it was going to be the only time that I would be here. I was 32. I was accepted to law school. So I was going to be going to law school the following, literally a month after the Olympic Games. It was August, the Olympics, and I was going to law school in September. So it was an opportunity. I had the perfect storm to release, enjoy, regardless of the outcome. Because quite frankly, people, when you say you went to the Olympics, the last thing they ask you is what medal you did. They're just amazed by the fact that you got to go to an Olympics. So when I competed, I was competing against everybody. I had fought everybody that I was going to face and had beaten them. There was one individual who was the world champion from the year before who I hadn't fought. He had won the World Cup, and he was my final match. He was Spanish Juan Solis from Spain, and the King and Queen of Spain came to watch the match. So you can imagine the amazing amount of pressure there was. And it was interesting because the guys I had beaten up along the way that particular day were trying to tell him how to beat me. And I was kind of laughing because I was like, well, it really didn't go that well for you. So I'm not sure what advice you're going to give him. But, you know, my friend, when we went in the stadium, I tell this story often, they were clapping and stomping the floor of the stadium, which was concrete. And they were stomping the floor so hard that in the tunnel under the stadium, as you walk in, you could feel it vibrating and you could hear them chanting. And my coach at the time, who had been on the team with me, is like, pretend like they're cheering for you. And I'm like, no, they're cheering for him. I said, but that's going to change shortly. You know, so it was a I had a great performance. I had a, 40% potential performance, which on any given day, if you do 40% of what you practice, you're going to have a world-class performance. So I had a great day. I can't complain. It could have been different. I could have had a horrible performance and he could have had an amazing performance and I'd be the silver medalist and you'd be interviewing him. But it was the first time that I had winning that had an effect on me that I didn't anticipate, because I had won a lot of other tournaments that were equally as important, but at least to me, and I didn't really experience that. But this particular tournament, for some reason, I did, and it was an odd occurrence because I didn't expect it, so it was kind of neat.
Now, I've got a couple of questions that are kind of offshoots from that story. So
Yeah.
you mentioned the responsibilities of being a U.S. team captain. Take us through some of those. Are those primarily just kind of being a leader and a mentor for maybe the younger teammates, or does it go beyond that? Are there administrative things you have to do? What did you mean by those responsibilities?
So when you're on the Olympic team, and I've served in some other roles on the Olympic teams after that. When you're the Olympic team captain for your sport, there are team captain meetings that you're required to go to. You are the spokesperson that gets invited to all the soirees and parties and stuff like that. You're also the primary contact for your sport to the Olympic movement. And you're the buffer between the coaches and the athletes. You run practice, warm-ups. In some cases, you run practices. You run after practices, because often what happens on these teams back then, you got coaches who were good intended, but they didn't necessarily have an understanding of what you needed to do to train. So we'd have the team practice, and then after that we'd have the captain's practice. So if you wanted to come to the captain's practice, you came to the captain's practice and we ran it. As far as being the buffer between the team and the coach, often the world championships before, we had this nightmare of a junior coach who had been a competitor, and he was just, he was a jerk. He was a jerk, and I don't want to say his name, Chungshik Choi. I'm going to say his name, but he was a total jerk, and he would do ridiculous stuff with the team and try to make the team do ridiculous stuff. And so I got to the point where I finally just told him, and I had to stand between him and the team and say, and I literally left the practice. And I did that once at the Olympics, actually. I had a good friend of mine who was the guy who was going in the stadium, Dae Sung Lee, and he was giving us a hard time. And I was like, he had kind of said to me, he knew me, so he was like, I know you're not taking this seriously, so stop fooling around. I was like, say another word, I'm gonna leave. So I left. I got up from practice, got on a bicycled around Barcelona for a day, and everybody would keep seeing me because the senior instructors were like, where's he going? And I'm like, I would just keep going. And then by that, he came, we talked that night, sorted it out and got on. And often when you're the team captain, you serve as the protection between the coaches who are well intended but not necessarily understanding what the athletes need to do. Second, you are mentoring these younger athletes. Like my teammate, who was my roommate, James Viasana, you know, I mean, we've got some funny stories about him, but you know, he was my guy to mentor. I was teaching him the way to be on the U.S. team, much as my captains had taught me to be. So the additional responsibility of that, and then quite frankly, they look to you to be a leader to win. On that same team, though, I had great athletes like Juan Moreno, who had gone to the '88 Olympics, Han Wan Lee, who had gone to the '88 Olympics. James was the new guy. So I had a lot of great athletes on the team with me. And so it was a strong Olympic team, you know, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like it. And then kind of moving forward into the actual day of that final match, you know, you mentioned the crowd and how crazy it was and being the enemy in a sense, right? So one of the things that my students who obviously aren't competing on an Olympic level, but students always like, Jackson, how do you handle nerves? How do you not get nervous? Things like that, right? So in that moment, in the tunnel, walking onto the mat, you know, you also remembered the advice from your coach to just have fun, right? So are you nervous in that situation? Was that something that was just beyond nerves? Kind of take us through kind of your mental state going into that and kind of how you do cope with nervousness when you were about to fight.
So pre-tournament, and I'll give you a contrast between me and my James Viasana. Pre-tournament, we go to the arena. That's where we train. But it was such a long drive, we ended up just training in a local school because it was easier to get to and we could drink coffee too. We go to the arena pre-tournament and my guys are fighting. I'm actually fighting towards the end of the tournament. And you get used to the arena. So that's an opportunity for you to get rid of some of your nerves. The warm-up area is separated by these curtains and you can kind of see between the curtains. And so I would warm up back there. A lot of guys would try to find some place. I wanted to warm up in front of people. I wanted my competitors to understand what was going to happen shortly. So I was kicking targets, kicking shields. And I can remember the Spanish guy who had won a bunch of matches. And he was a great competitor, really, really crafty and smart. And then I was kicking my target and I key up and I looked through the hole in the curtains. And I saw him look at me, and I looked at him. And he kind of turned his head down, and I was like, "He's done," right in my mind. So whatever nervousness I had about the individual, pretty much went away. Literally from the first kick, I had seen his coach give him this instruction to change his body side, assuming that if he changed his position, I wouldn't be able to hit him. So from the very first kick, I kicked him as hard as humanly possible in the backside of his body. And at that moment, I saw him turn around, look at his coach and go, now what? Right? And so my nervousness kind of went away pre-event, and then it realized itself in the first kick of the match. The only other time I got nervous during that match, quite honestly, was the third round where he got desperate. Because then he started to attack, because I kind of picked him apart during the rest of the match and controlled the match. The third round, he tried to be more aggressive because he really didn't have a choice. And I did get a little nervous because he kicked me in the shoulder. I thought maybe they'd give him a point. We're in Spain. The king and queen of Spain are there. Spain needs its gold medal too. But I then scored in quick succession 2 amazing points right before the close of maybe in the last minute of the match. It was a 9-minute match. And I knew very rarely do you know you've won, because back then they cheated. The Koreans were the worst, and they still are. Cheat. They have perfected the art of cheating to a level you can't imagine. So I was still nervous at that point that it wouldn't be fair. But I could tell I had won, and I knew that I had won. So at the moment, up until the moment they raised your hand, you're really never sure. But I had a good feeling.
Mhm. That's interesting. So the way that, and obviously being a sport karate guy, I'm much more familiar with point fighting. So with Olympic Taekwondo, and at least maybe the scoring was back then, you don't know what the score is until they announce it at the end. Do you even know between rounds or?
Well, between rounds, I'm gonna have to go back and look at the scoreboard. They put up the points between rounds. So you knew going into the final round you were winning. Um, but I've lost matches where I've been winning the first two rounds, or they leave them tie, and then you lose the last round. So the year before it had happened to me, I was fighting Korea in the semis, and the guy didn't touch me. I mean, nice guy, but didn't touch me. He's a tough guy, like was kind of a gangster mafia guy. Didn't touch me. First round 1-1, 2-2. Second round 1-1. So I knew going into the third round I was going to have to do something extraordinary, but they gave us tie scores and gave him superiority. Guy didn't touch me. Not didn't physically hit me. And so when you see those kind of things happen, I was watching, I don't watch much of anything. I was watching some boxing match this week and I saw the same thing. I'm watching the match and then I look at the scorecards and I'm like, I don't know any of these fighters. I don't care about either of them. But after watching the match, I was like, I don't think that can be the scorecard. But so it's all subjective. So you always have to remember that from you coming from what you do, I'm sure you have you've had a lot of subjective decisions. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the nature of any martial arts, whether you're a combat or a performance sport within the umbrella of martial arts. You're always
Yeah.
going to be dealing with judges that either see the call go your direction or they think your stances were good and another judge thinks your stances were bad. And
Yeah.
there's always going to be a subjective nature to it. But one thing that I find oddly consistent is some of those preparation mechanisms that you were talking about on the day of the event. Because very similarly, now granted, I'm not an Olympian, not claiming to be at the level of one, but well, sport karate doesn't have Olympics, but that's a totally different story that we'll get to. But anyway, I find myself going down to the tournament arena the morning of the event to see what everything looks like. And same thing, kind of you were talking about the warm-ups and the almost intimidation tactics that you would use in the warm-ups. I do something very similar. Hour before I compete, I'm in the ring that we're going to be competing in, warming up, going through all my tricks, showing everybody like, hey, this is what I can do and you can't do this. So,
Right.
be ready, right? And I think that's something that's very beneficial to high level competitors. So any students that are watching this, young competitors, regardless of what sport within the martial arts that you compete in, that's something that is very important, not only to, and you don't want to disrespectfully intimidate your competitors, of course, but to boost your own confidence, go through your warm-ups, do your full performances, show what you can do, whether it's warming up the kicking like Master Perez was talking about, or whether what I'm saying, which is warming up some of your tricks if you're in the performance martial arts. That's something that can give you a lot of confidence that you can kind of pour over into your actual competition, regardless of if your competitors get intimidated by it or not. So that's really important. Now, Master Perez, you talk about, a fighter not even hitting you and still scoring some points. And on the other hand, you're somebody who, when you hit somebody in your matches, you made sure they knew that you hit them, right? You've got, a highlight reel that I shared to the Jax Rudolph podcast Facebook page last week, showing some of your knockouts and some of those highlights. I mean, we see dudes completely out cold, bodies limp. We see helmets flying off people's heads. I'm sure you may have a couple of favorites from your career that you'd like to share. So just take us through, first of all, your mentality and kind of why you feel that Taekwondo should be that way, because I certainly understand that. And then take us down memory lane. Give us some of your favorite knockout stories.
So first, and I got in trouble for this at the '87 Pan Am Games. So I'm fighting Ecuador in my second match, maybe, and or maybe second or third match, and I knock him out, like carried out on a stretcher, fractured skull knockout. And so they asked me a question, USA Today. They're like, well, how did you feel about that? And I go, how did I feel about that? It was competition, if he could have done it to me, would have done it to me. I'm from New York. I'm not from Kansas, so sorry, and it was probably a little immaturity, but from where I come from, it's kind of reality. So when it comes to hitting people, the way I look at these things now, especially, is when it comes to training for competition, you need to maximize the rules, whatever those rules are, to the best of your ability, best of your benefit. And then you need to look at your day as a match, not the match, but the entire day. So in those days, you'd have to fight 6 or 7 matches, 3 3-minute rounds. That's 21 rounds. Now, if you can take one of those matches and make it 1 round or 15 seconds or 10 seconds or 2 rounds, then you need to do that. So absent the other guy quitting, just because he doesn't want to get beat up anymore, you have to kind of be able to knock them out. And it's allowed in the rules. So for me, I realized that I was a shorter guy, and I was in a heavier weight division. So I had to maximize my skill set, use it to the best of my ability to maximize it against my opponents, and then create fear, not only in the individual there, but the guy coming in next, so that he would know it was a potential if he did something stupid. So that was my mentality. So every year I started, the first year I had this round kick that I would do that was unique, and it was a short round kick on the inside, and I was able to maneuver myself around people's bodies and hit them with it. Then that turned into an axe kick, that because every year once they figure out what you can do, you have to change it. Then I had an axe kick I was knocking guys out with for a while, and then I ended up with back hook kick. And there's not really a way that somebody can, if you do that kick correctly, there's nothing someone else can do. If they take a chance to kick your stomach, they're going, and they don't prepare correctly, they're going to get knocked out. And then I made sure that those kicks were powerful enough that if they hit you, the result was going to be you were going to be unconscious, because that was the purpose of the kick. The kick, I don't want to score a point. I want to knock you unconscious so that you go home and I get to go to my next match. And as brutal as that sounds, it's a fighting mentality, and it's permissible. It's in the rules, and it should be, and that's why it's there. And so being a smaller guy was necessary. Second, it created a ripple effect. Third, literally every tournament I fought in on a national level or an international level, I knocked out at least one person. So that tone was set. But the collegiate nationals, I knocked out all my opponents. That was the only tournament ever. But once you knock a guy out, the rest of the day is a little different. People aren't taking the kind of chances that give you an opportunity to do that. So I have 2 actually. One of my favorite, I hate to say favorite knockouts, because I think it's unfortunate, and I also don't want to disrespect the opponents that it happened to, because they were trying their best to win a match or 2. But one of my, what's the right word, more satisfying tournaments or matches was when I knocked out this guy who had told people he was going to win. His instructor was going to cheat, and I knocked him out in 5 seconds with a body kick, with a back kick to the body, and I broke his pelvis. And while he was laying on the floor, I kind of looked down at him, because he fell where I was standing, right? Because it's a spot I have to stand on. So I kind of looked down at him, and I go, and I never did this, I always was respectful, but I kind of muttered under my breath, do I look so old now? So, because he had said I was old, his instructor wanted him on the team, and they were going to whatever. And I was like, so that was satisfying in the sense that, and I was watching the Michael Jordan thing where he talks about that, whatever happened, he said some guy sent him in, got him worked up. It got me worked up. I was like, oh, really? I had been cheated. USA Tae Kwon Do was run by criminals for a while. And so I had been cheated by many people in many matches. I had to win by huge margins in the beginning to get through the mix, because these guys were so self-serving. So that was a nice one. I've had some I've had some, knockouts are kind of interesting in the sense that, I had one that told me I needed to retire. So I had a great friend who I competed against every year, 86, 87. He was my final in 86 and 87 at the Pan Ams. I competed against him in 89 and I knocked him out. But in 89, when I knocked him out, he was carried out on a stretcher and they had to do CPR. It was the first time I felt bad. He was a friend and like I knew him. And when they carried him out and I was like thinking about it, I actually felt bad. So I realized I only had a few more years to compete because you can't feel bad. If you feel bad, then it's a competition. And if they could do it to you, they would do it to you. And it's a part of the game. So I think it's an important part of the game.
And I think that that's one thing that anybody watching, because, even you admitted that somebody watching, even if you're a martial artist, if you haven't been around, Olympic Tae Kwon Do, especially in that era, that may sound a little barbaric. And I think that the important perspective to maintain is look at it comparatively. And today we see UFC fighters that go into the ring literally saying, I'm going in the ring to either kill or be killed. And there's UFC fighters that mean it. Because they know that they could die in that ring, and it's happened in MMA matches before. I don't know if it's happened in the UFC, but I mean that's something that anybody in a combat sport, you walk into the ring respecting that and knowing that when you sign up to compete at a certain level, that you have to defend yourself from that happening because the other people are going to be trying to do that as well.
There's a certain level of seriousness that you should enter the arena in. It's not a game, it's not a match, it's not a sport, it's a fight. And I've always maintained that. So, you get these guys that talk about the game or the match. It's a fight. It's a physical fight in the sense that you're getting into the ring where another guy can kick and punch you as hard as he wants, knock you out, and you have to go home. So when you go into that arena, that can happen to you. And so just to be clear, I didn't care if you came into the arena and you were prepared, unprepared. If you're not prepared, don't come. Like I got yelled at because the Mexican coach in 87 World Championships, he comes up to me before the match and he says, oh, this guy's not very good and blah, blah, blah. Can you take it easy on him? So I'm looking at him and I'm like, are you kidding me? So the kid runs for me the entire match beginning. And so I just knock him out. Like I literally knock him out outside the ring, I think, right? Because he was running from me. And, in retrospect, maybe it was not great. But that particular kid could have thrown, I could have been goofing around and he could have hit me with a kick and knocked me out. So, it was in Spain and it was not great. My coach actually turned around in his chair and looked away from me. So, anyway, and I think it actually cost me, that was a tough year. I took a bronze medal. But, it's an interesting question because I think what I was trying to get at is there's a dichotomy that exists in martial arts where we're supposed to be these amazing people and kind and generous and ability to modulate ourselves so we don't hurt anyone if we don't have to. And I think that's true. But then you have competition, which is not martial art. Competition is competition. And if you're going to compete, you can do so respectfully, but it's not your job to modulate your performance. It's your job to do your job. And so I think that's always been, when I teach martial art and I teach martial sport, I teach those slightly different. Mm-hmm. And I've met there are kids who are capable, like Jimmy Kim, American heavyweight, was capable of just modulating his performance. He was so much faster, stronger than people that he could be nice to them if he wanted to and still win. I was small. I wanted people to be afraid of me so I didn't have to worry about them going crazy, and trying to kill me.
Right. And I think that's an excellent perspective. And I think that's unique for a lot of our viewers that maybe have never heard that perspective before. So now I want to shift a little bit to everything that comes after the Olympics, because winning an Olympic gold medal obviously comes with a lot of opportunities, probably some that I don't even know about, but one that I know about for sure, because we've talked about it before. And there were a lot of sport karate legends from my world that were on the show as well, is WMAC Masters, where you start as Olympus. So tell us a bit about that experience and what that was like, and how cool it was to have a nickname like Olympus on a national TV show.
So the producers of the show had called me. I was in law school. I was at Rutgers in Jersey, and I was actually coaching, and I was head of team for the World Championship team in Madison Square Garden. I got a call to go to Florida during Christmas to be in the pilot, and I was like, okay, I'm off from school, my exams, I can figure it out. And then I actually didn't go. They had the first group of guys go, and it didn't include me in the pilot. So then I get a call after the pilot to be on the show. And I said, no. They said, well, would you come and meet us? I go, no. I said, I set aside this time during Christmas. I'm in law school. I got stuff going on. So please come meet us. So I went to New York City, and I met with Dan Hupp, Kathy Borland, and Norman Grossfeld, the exec producers on the show, and one of the editors and directors. And they spent 4 hours talking to me about the show and telling me about all these people that were going to be on it, and I was like, yeah, I'm in law school, I don't really care. Then they said, well, there's going to be an action figure. I go, action figure? So I'm like, okay, I'll do it, because I was like, I'll be an action figure. So when you get on the show, it was interesting because on the show were some amazing martial artists I've developed an amazing amount of respect for. A lot of those guys I didn't know because I was competing in a different world. And so when I met Chris Casamassa, Hakeem Alston, Eric Betts, he and Nguyen, Richie Brandon, may he rest in peace, he passed away a few years back. These guys were unbelievable. Mike Bernardo, these guys were like, buff, shirts off, amazing. And then on top of it, very talented and skilled martial artists. We were treated like royalty. I mean, we had cars picking us up at the airports. We were put up in hotels, cars taking us back and forth, Universal Studios, shooting at night, shooting in the morning. We were treated like true kind of TV stars. And so it was a unique opportunity. They then asked me, before I got on the show, they said, well, what would your name be? And I go, I don't know. It's like, they come up with some names, because I think everybody kind of came up with their own names. So I suggested Olympus because of the Olympics and the torch logo representing the Olympics. And there are certain things you can do with the Olympic, things you can't do. This was something permissible. And then they showed me my outfit, which I still have here somewhere. And it was gold lame, with purple, because purple's for royalty. So I'm like, all right, so now I'm wearing a purple belt and, gold pajamas. But, I met Isaac Florentine, amazing director, Pat Johnson, and I ended up on Isaac's team with Eric Betts, who arguably so on the show you had guys who were really good at martial art, what I call Hollywood Kung Fu, and Eric and Ian took me under their wings and taught me all of that. They were Power Rangers, they had been Ninja Turtle, the whole thing. On the other side of the fence, you had Pat Johnson, who was doing major movies, Karate Kid and Batman, and Hakeem Alston and all those guys worked with him. So it was a behind the scenes that nobody knows. It was this little contest between the different styles of Hollywood Kung Fu. Isaac was very Sergio Leone and Hong Kong action, and Pat Johnson was Pat Johnson, the way his style was. So the difference was Pat Johnson got a lot more work from people. They did Batman, cool stuff like that. Isaac's gone on, no, he's done some amazing stuff. He's really one of my favorite directors. And he would yell at us a lot. Like we'd be on set, because we're young and stupid. And we were in the cage and he'd be like, open the cage, I will kill you all. Open the cage if I had a machine gun. He was an Israeli, he had studied karate himself, so he's really good at karate. He's like, open the cage, let me in, I'll kill you. I'm like, don't open the cage, man. He'll come in. So there's some really amazing, good stories about those times with those guys. But I was blessed, honestly. You couldn't, you know, have had a better anything with the amount of kind of guys that we had that were doing what we were doing.
And I've got two questions that want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into that. Number one is just personal curiosity. I heard Carmichael Simon on another show mention recently, you know, the training sessions that would happen behind the scenes and everybody doing paddle kicks. And so maybe do you have any stories about, you know, one of the times?
I forgot about Carmichael because Carmichael was in the second season. Another amazing athlete. I didn't forget about him. I just neglected to mention him because he's an amazing athlete. Yeah, what would happen was, so you got to imagine you have, I don't know, 20 of the best martial artists arguably in the world at that time, in the United States. I don't want to say the world, but certainly in the United States, in a room. And then half of them are working, half of them aren't working. When you're not working, you're working as a ninja. And then we're all training. So Hakeem and Mike Bernardo and these guys would go lift weights every day. And I'd go with them and, you know, try to get my little bit of buffness that I could get. And at the same time, I would be kicking targets because that's what I kind of did. On the show, there were a lot of foreign performers. There weren't a lot of fighters. Hakeem was a fighter. So the guys who could fight, you know, we'd be training like we were fighting, right? So we kick targets and stuff. And some of these guys were amazing athletes. You know, like Eric and these guys could do kicks that were kind of amazing. And Larry Lamb. So we'd get these training sessions together, and they hadn't really kicked with targets. So I brought a bunch of targets over to show them how we used paddle kicking. And so we would share techniques. So yeah, there were a lot of, we didn't have any, surprisingly, I don't remember any sparring matches. You know what I mean? Like you would think that a couple of us would get together and spar. Right. One of the hardest episodes I had, because Hakeem and I were both of the same mindset, it was a match where I had against Hakeem. I had to fight Hakeem in the arena. And we were kicking each other, you know, pretty much full out. And, you know, because he's like, I want to keep it real. Let's keep it real. You know, so we do these choreographed things. We were kicking each other pretty hard. Murmur Chen, I don't know if you remember that name. Murmur kicked one of the ninjas, man. I think almost knocked him out. I was there. I was like, you know, these guys, you know, we had it was an interesting show that way.
That's very cool. If only we could have footage of like a real live training.
Oh, no, there is.
Austin and a gold.
Oh, no. There's footage. There's an outtake reel. Send me a note. I'll send you an outtake. I have an outtake reel of some funny stuff. But I don't want to mention his name. I will. Ho-Sung Park. But he had to break a piece of wood on the show, and he couldn't break it. And I don't think it was any fault of his own. It might have been the wood, and they kind of scored it. And if you ever look closely, you can see it scored, and it still didn't break. And then he goes, when he hits it, he goes, you know, and it's going, the world's greatest martial artist. And he goes, ow. So I think they had gotten the wrong, you know, I think they got the wrong piece of wood. So, you know, he was a talented, him and his brother, Ho-Sung and Ho-Young, really talented martial artists.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue to the next question I wanted to ask, which is a story that you've told me before that I wanted to maybe share with the world here. I don't remember if it was Ho-Sung or Ho-Young, but one of them nickname was like Superstar or something to that effect, right? And apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I'm going off of memory here, but in their contract, they could not lose on the show. They had to win all their matches. But the way that the script was going, they kind of wanted, you know, Olympus to wind up winning, and so they had to use some little finagling around, I guess, to make that work with them wanting you to win, but also Ho-Sung, Ho-Young, whichever one it was, to not lose. So just take us through that briefly.
So, you know, Ho-Sung, you know, again, a lot of respect for the guy. I was his roommate for about 10 minutes in the show. Unbeknownst to us, or to me at least, um, he had this thing where he couldn't lose, wasn't allowed to lose to somebody. And so it became an issue when him and Hakeem fought for one. And then with me, I was the Dragon Star champion. So he was supposed to be the next Dragon Star champion. And because I had beaten Mike Bernardo. And so we were trying to find a creative way for him to ascend without winning. Mm. So what I did, what we did was, because he had become well, anyway, he didn't want to lose, and he wanted to win. So when Hakeem and him had to fight, I think we found a creative way for that. For me, what I did was, instead of him hitting me, I did a flying side kick, and he ducked, and I flew off I killed myself. So he technically wins, but I was my own undoing. So he didn't actually get to kick me. He was an interesting guy. You know, like my first night on the shoot, they make you a ninja, so you can kind of get a feel for what's going on. So I'm one of the ninjas on the show, and he's fighting. Is he fighting Hakeem? Can't remember who he's fighting, but it's a very elaborate setup, and it's like a rolling camera. It's Isaac shooting. It's crazy, and all I have to do is get hit, and then fall. But the way I get hit, I try to fall, and I fall against a police car that's on its side, and there's a light. But I have such a big butt that I'm trying to hide behind the police car. And the camera guy for Isaac is going, and you hear Isaac going, good, 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 good. What? Who is that stupid ninja? So I am the stupid ninja, because all you can see is me trying to hide behind a police siren where my butt is sticking out. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I beat a stupid ninja my first night on the job. And then Ho-sung, in that same shoot, we do this whole shoot, it's perfect. And he goes, was the light on my chest? So he was concerned whether the light had focused on his massive muscled chest. And I used to teach, that was our big line. We had a lot of takeaways. Is the light on my chest? We must reshoot. So anyway, yeah, that was that. We had a lot of interesting people on the show.
That's great. And I think that those stories, especially with the caliber of martial artists that everybody was, it's just so cool to hear those stories. But now we're going to shift into a different realm of martial arts, which is the martial arts business side of things and school owning, which, since your career as a competitor and then as a TV star, and now moving into business, you've opened a very successful chain of schools, Gold Medal Martial Arts. I've taught at many of them in the Bay Area. Very professional setup, and very high level students as well. Students that are respectful, students that are talented, students that are very fast learners. And so just take us through kind of when you opened your first school, and some of the things for maybe any other school owners watching. What do you feel has allowed you to be so successful?
So, it's important to remember that, I had a unique opportunity, because after the Olympics, I went to work for a couple of martial arts companies, and I chose to work for Century a few years back. And I met David Wall, who I have an amazing amount of respect for, Mike Dillard, the owner. Took me under their wings and gave me some opportunities to do a lot. So I had the good fortune to run the video production company for a long time, and watched the best martial artists in the world do their craft. And then in addition to that, the best business people in the craft. And this is when Mr. Dillard created Maya, and along with Frank Silverman and later Mike Metzger, they created this thing which taught people how to do what we do. Frank, I'm forever grateful for. Frank came out to my first location where you taught, and showed me how to do that, helped me get a grand opening where I was in every school, literally in every school. By that Monday, I had 60 to 100 people signed up. And I also consulted him on every other school that I opened. So I had the good fortune of listening to guys like Mike and Frank. And back then we were filming, all these other guys, Ali, all the guys that you would think of, the usual suspects, Greg Silva and stuff like that. Arguably one of the brightest minds in the world are the guys that I got a chance to be exposed to. The other good fortune was that as we did all the video contact, I met amazing other guys like Mike Chatterataback, yourself, and we integrated into our programs in our schools. And you're a perfect example, our affiliate program. When we met you and you were doing what you're doing at such a high level, we wanted to bring the best that we could bring. So I realized I was a good fighter. I was a horrible weapons guy. So you were amazing. And bringing you in, bringing your program online and running that program in our schools was one of the biggest successes we've had with our black belt program. And I can't, I know I don't want to talk while you're here, but I can't thank you enough for that. And the times that you came down and spent with our students. The difference, I think, in our schools are in relatively affluent neighborhoods with parents that they have their eyes set on Stanford, Harvard, Yale kind of thing. And so you're dealing with kids who aren't going to grow up to be professional martial artists or fighters or MMA guys. They want life skill development. And so we focus and always have focused on building community and life skill development. And I think that's the most important part. So when a young man comes in like you, Stanford, I met you when you just started at Stanford, and now you're a graduate onto medical school shortly. So when you can bring in these kind of role models, and you couple that with Mike Swain, who's a partner in one of my schools, and guys like this, I've had the good fortune to bring in, so many great people that just happen through the Bay Area. And you'd be surprised that the people just stop by that I had no idea were even in town, right? So, but that's not really the key to our success. I think the success in the schools is our methodology, because most people don't know I'm an Olympic gold medalist. If you ask them why the school is named gold medal, they say because it sounds better than silver medal. Most of the kids don't know. So I think that it's an interesting time. It's going to be an interesting test for everyone, because I think we're in unique circumstances and times. And I think what everybody in our industry has to understand is we're starting over. It doesn't matter who you are, who you thought you were. You look at it as if you're starting a new school. You have a grand opening. And if you have some students left, those are your intros. Now you got to build your business again. So, Jackson, the question becomes, in a post-COVID environment for anything, if it had a value, a benefit, it will survive. If you were a life coach, you better get a job at Costco. If you're a martial arts instructor, you're a life skills coach, and you're a person who teaches an actual skill that manifests itself in physical and mental and intellectual and spiritual aspects, you're going to be okay. So if you can stay the storm, which is going to be the question, you'll be okay. But if you were a guy selling iPhone cases, you might want to get another job.
For sure. And I think that's a testament to the resiliency of martial arts and how important it is to our communities. And clearly, as big as your following is in the Bay Area with all of your students, it's something that has become ingrained in that community is these students that are role models in their middle schools and their high schools that are then inspiring other students to come on into the school. And it creates a really good cycle that helps your business continue to operate. And I 100% agree with what you're saying about in terms of the post-COVID environment and looking at it as a new start. Having a new grand opening, a reopening, if you will, and treating those students that were able to stick around as your intros and building from there. I think that's an excellent way to look at it, and I think you've done an excellent job. Or obviously, you don't have to have me think it. You just have done an excellent job with your schools over the years. So a couple more topics that we want to get to. First and foremost, one thing that I want to address is if anybody that follows you on social media knows that you've been rather critical of Olympic Taekwondo, or at least USA Taekwondo, in recent years, some of the things that have been going on with the rules and the scoring systems and things of that nature. So maybe just briefly kind of give your position on that. And more importantly, because ultimately we want to be able to help people and make these things better. So first, give us your criticisms, but then what can Taekwondo do to continue being an Olympic sport, to continue being represented on that scale, and to improve from the state that they're at now, which you don't think is a very good one?
So, I've had the good fortune to sit at a lot of the higher tables in the Olympic movement. I was on the board of directors for the USOC, executive committee, high strategic planning forces, and I worked with some of the best minds, arguably, with me being the worst one in the room for the Olympic sport in general. So I oversaw all the sports. In that capacity, I went back to Tae Kwon Do. I was on the board of directors for a while, and I came back to it and tried to oversee what they were doing. I then went to the World Taekwondo Federation and became their director of education, and saw the challenges there. So basically what happened, just so you can understand the Later Foundation, was they were cheating so badly. They were so bad at cheating. They weren't even good at cheating, that they got caught repeatedly. So there was a burden put on them by the Olympic Committee to make the sport more fair and less cheating. So they came up with an electronic scoring system, of which I was there when it was happening. I created a multi-tier scoring system for excellence. So for example, if you were spinning a bow staff and you jumped up here, you should get 5 points. If you just take the bow staff, you go like this, you get 1 point. Taekwondo is the same way. You should reward excellence, not punish bad behavior. So 90% of an education for a referee was warnings. Don't do this, don't do this, as opposed to fixing the technical regimen and scoring. So we created that and put it through. At the same time, they were working on this electronic scoring system, which doesn't work. It's a terrible system, can't work, will never work. And it was put in place to fix malintended, malfeasant referees or inadequate, incompetent referees, neither of which is acceptable. So if a sport that values honesty, commitment, integrity, all indomitable spirit, can't fix its referees, they can't have those same tenets, then you're in trouble to start. And that's kind of the truth. So with that said, the scoring system with the electronics doesn't know the difference between an adequate technique or something that just scores. So if I make contact with my hand and it's enough power and it makes an electronic contact, it scores. Now the solution for that would be to let the referee undo that, but then you're back to the cheating problem. So they've taken a bad, horrible system and allowed it, because it's equally sucky for everyone. Is there literally what they say? It's equally bad for everybody. So the sport now has deteriorated to a sport where people try to make contact in any form or fashion because it can't be challenged with any part that can score a technique. So it doesn't have to be a proper technique anymore. There's no more power. And there are better systems out there. Like the Adidas system had a power system, which is consistent with martial arts. If you hit somebody this hard, you should get a point. You hit somebody this hard, you should get 2 or 3 points. You jump and spin in the air, you should get 4 or 5 points. So anyway, that's the solution. As far as the problem goes, the problem is there's a malfeasant, terrible leader. And he's entrenched in Korea because his family was rich, and he is still there. And he became president to replace the last corrupt guy. And so he's told people that if we change the scoring system, we'll be out of the Olympics. That's not true, because I sit at those tables too. They just simply want to see a fair match and an exciting match. And if anything, I believe right now Taekwondo's in danger of being removed from the Olympics because it makes even less sense now when you watch it. You can't really understand it. It's a bunch of tall, skinny guys cave pooping. They're lifting their leg up and they're dropping their feet like this. It's I'd rather watch point karate matches, to be frank. They're better athletes, they're more skilled, and they're better. It actually looks like fighting. The challenge that Taekwondo is going to have is when and if the Olympics happen next year, and I don't believe they're going to happen, they'll have to go see karate. Karate makes sense. When you watch that kind of karate, it's old style. They only score old style techniques or whatever. They don't score any silliness, but at least it makes sense. When you see it, it is what it is. Fencing is similar. Fencing is not just, you have to fence in a certain way to score a point. And Taekwondo used to be like that. You can't just lift your leg up and go like this and scorpion whip kick the guy. Like if somebody had hit me with the scorpion kick back in the day, I would have kicked him and broke his leg. I mean, you know, I wish one of these guys would try this. I mean, I tell my friends this all the time because I have friends that are still coaching in the sport. And I'm like, I don't understand why you guys, because they don't want to lose points, right? So they're not going to just kick the guy. I would just kick the guy really hard, and he wouldn't kick me like that anymore. He wouldn't try it anyway. But it is a challenge. I think the sport has deteriorated, de-evolved to such a level it's not watchable. And this is not by me. I'm telling you that my cadre of friends who have done the Olympic sport since I did it till now, they don't watch. I've tried to turn it on and like gotten up in the middle of the night to watch it in London. I turn it off. It's horrible. And I've been in the movement for quite some time. So the idea that the Olympic Committee, the International Olympic Committee, wants it this way is not true. Not true at all. So the president of WTF, Cho, has to go. There's been a movement started trying to get this guy to go, but we'll see.
Well, you got a nice hashtag there with Cho has to go, but
Cho's got to go.
I won't.
Cho's got to go. Cho's got to go. But it's the best and brightest minds in Tae Kwon Do can probably fix it. But it's the me first, me too politic. And, as long as they get theirs, everybody's kind of quiet. So if they go to a tournament, whatever. So it's a sad thing because, what I challenge the viewers to do is go just search 88, 92, maybe up to about 2000 World Championships and Olympics. Watch that for a few seconds. Then fast forward to 2016 and beyond and watch any of that. And then make your own decision.
Right. And some of the problems, it's interesting because like talking about, the scoring techniques that aren't even techniques, that shouldn't be scoring points. That's an issue that's often debated in sport karate circles as well, right? Some leagues allow a back fist to the body, which is kind of just like a leaning in, kind of tapping technique, whereas other leagues don't. And the big point of contention for any league is, and this has to do with the referee and how the judges are calling it, is if you're executing, say, a defensive side kick, right? The difference between a chamber in which the heel winds up on the opponent's stomach, or is it an actual extended defensive side kick? But the difference that I feel like the contrast is where you see that the referees, now they're on the electronic scoring, but previously the referees were corrupt and they were cheating. In sport karate, at least, in point fighting, I feel like in general, referees get a lot of criticism, but they're better than the criticism that they receive. And there's also leagues that are doing more to improve the referees through referee certification systems, like what ProMAC is doing, the Professional Martial Arts Conference, so on and so forth. And then I think as we move into a new era of sport karate, we'll be seeing more and more regulation and more things being done to make it look more professional so that sport karate maybe can be elevated to an Olympic level or an X Games level or wherever it needs to go. At the very minimum, getting to a professional level where we have regular TV coverage. And so that leads me to an interesting question, which is, so we're going to disqualify traditional karate because you mentioned how that's going to be a demonstration sport. Taekwondo's in it. Judo's in it. What about these other forms of martial arts that haven't had the opportunity to be showcased in the Olympics? I noticed on your Facebook you posted something about jiu-jitsu the other day. There's obviously sport karate. What elements of martial arts would you like to see? Not saying that Taekwondo should go and this should replace it, but assuming Taekwondo stays, let's say traditional karate gets in and becomes a regular sport as well. What other martial art do you feel should be represented?
Well, right now, just to close the loop on traditional Taekwondo, traditional karate will be in Japan and then it won't be in. So basically the new rule is host country gets a sport to showcase. It's a full medal sport, but once and done. With regard to the other sports, I don't believe that Taekwondo should still be in the Olympics. And this is coming from a guy who's doing it and has done it at a high level. So they should be forced to make the sport to matter again. And the recipe, and this goes to outcomes. So if the outcome of an Olympic sport is first and foremost sport for all, meaning everybody can do it, shouldn't take a lot of money, which is why equestrian's having trouble. And it should have some value to the populace. Then there are sports that potentially could be on the Olympic program. But it gets to a point where it's a question of, are you just, is there really a difference between karate and Taekwondo? If you're an aficionado, there is. And there should be. So should they both be on the program, or should they be disciplines of martial arts in general? So one of the approaches that was considered a while ago was martial art in general like sailing. Sailing has different disciplines. Equestrian has different disciplines, and you all fall under that umbrella. So you fight in the martial art category, and you have this, this, and this. As far as jujitsu goes, jujitsu itself originally was part of judo, right? Judo and jujitsu came from the same tree, and they've bifurcated and have their own thing. I do believe that jujitsu as a sport and as an art deserves an Olympic berth, maybe more so than some others. And I used to be on the committee for the U.S. that decided who we were going to accept in the U.S. as designated as Olympic and Pan Am sports, give them recognition. And I've had bridge and tennis. I mean, bridge and what's the other one? Bridge was one that always amazed me. Bridge wanted to come in. Tug of war wanted back in. And I'm like, bridge. Oh, chess. That was the other one. Chess, an Olympic sport. So I have a basic rule for sport in general. Should be dangerous. Should require some level of athleticism. If it's only skill, it's not a sport. Shooting, not a sport. Shooting is something else. There's a level of skill necessary, but not necessarily a level of athleticism. Shooting was included because of where the idea of the Olympics came from, almost like a military game. But with jiu-jitsu, it is a very organized, technical, skill, athletic event. The part of it they need to lose, because it's different, is the MMA part. The MMA part is absolutely a sport and art and all this, but it doesn't necessarily carry the Olympic values with it. When boxers go to the Olympics, they're respectful. They're not, I'm going to kill the guy, I'm going to rip his head off. They're like, the Olympics is a brand, and you have to carry the brand with you, I think. I think jiu-jitsu does. When I met the Gracies at the UFC #2, because I commentated there, those guys were gentlemen. They are respectful. They are amazing martial artists, and they're humble. They are martial artists. So I think if you can bifurcate MMA, which is its own thing, from jiu-jitsu, then jiu-jitsu, as it's competed in jiu-jitsu tournaments, does deserve a berth, and I think it can make it because I work with the Olympic Council of Asia as well, and I know jiu-jitsu is in the Asian Games, which are larger than the Olympics, actually.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I feel like an important step, just from my perspective, is making sure that these martial arts become more mainstream so that the average viewer knows what's going on. Because this is a criticism both of point fighting and of jiu-jitsu, is that, if you're sitting in a sports bar and flipping channels and you're just a regular person who's never trained martial arts, and you see two guys rolling on the ground or two people clashing and then being broken up and clashing being broken up, whether that's jiu-jitsu or point fighting respectively, you don't know what's going on, right? Which is, from my point of view, and of course I'm biased as a sport martial arts performance artist who does weapons competition and judges give a score, that is very much so made for TV, very much so made for performance, because you're being judged on the quality of your performance for the audience, right? And so that's why I've always seen that it would make sense that if we can just make it more mainstream and invest the time and effort and money and energy needed to be able to make it more mainstream, that is a viable option to be able to get more martial arts involved. Because once you get one martial art that makes it really big, I think that there becomes increasing levels of interest. For example, when we have MMA getting really, really big, all of a sudden now jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu schools in particular are much, much bigger, because in MMA broadcast, UFC, Bellator, One Championship, whatever, they're always talking about, whenever somebody goes to the ground, how's the jiu-jitsu game? Oh, so-and-so's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. And that is something that has helped increase the popularity of jiu-jitsu. I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit, but
well, I think that's an important thing to say, because what you have to say is this too, just to be clear. You got to make a decision whether the Olympics is about TV viewership. And if it is, because that's where they get sponsor dollars from, let me be clear. People watch the Olympics, and if they watch swimming, they have a lot of swimming. they watch what matters. They base their choices on sports, which is why they started considering esports and stuff like this, because they need sponsorship dollars and viewership. So I'm not sure that jujitsu survives an Olympics because it's not all that much fun to watch. I think MMA is much more fun to watch and people understand it better. When you watch a jiu-jitsu match, and this is a big complaint, you're going to have to change the rules to make it viewer friendly. And so you're going to have to disallow certain tactics and reward others. And that's when you talk about sport karate, and I don't speak about it because it's not my genre, but what I will say is this. If martial arts is going to be an Olympic sport, or martial arts in general, you have to first set your parameters and goals. So if you say that you're doing a martial art, martial was warlike warfare. The idea behind it was that when you hit somebody, originally one punch, one kill. But we know that doesn't happen in MMA. But the idea is that when you inflict that technique on somebody, it creates, like a video game, a certain amount of damage. That it's measurable. So you don't score certain techniques because they don't have the requisite power. Once you get away from that concept, and people get away from it for different reasons, you then lose martial art. So you say, I don't want the people to get hurt, so we're going to do light contact. Well, now you've gotten away from martial art. If you're going to do light contact, then you only score full contact techniques that would have created damage had they been thrown appropriately. So when you talk about a back fist to the body, listen, you find the biggest guy in the world, I'll stand there and let him back fist me to the body. I'm 60. I'm going to be okay. I might hurt a little, but I'm not going to drop to the floor unless he hits me in my solar plexus. You get that same guy and throw a reverse punch, I'm probably going to be laying on the floor. So it really does become, by the way, I'm not sure. I'm sure there's a guy out there with back fist in the world who probably kill me. But the reality is now you have to talk about outcomes, goals, and what martial art is in general. Then you can start defining and delineating. But be clear, jiu-jitsu practice as what is practiced in competition is not an Olympic viewable sport. Because a lot of the guys end up on the floor grabbing each other's ankles, and people aren't going to watch that unless you're an aficionado. Right now, nobody's watching Olympic Taekwondo unless they're a current aficionado. But everybody's watching MMA, whether you like it or hate it, and they don't know anything about it because everybody understands, like Mike Tyson says, somebody getting punched in the face.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that as martial artists, and this is me speaking to the audience here a little bit as well, as martial artists, I think that one very important thing is unity. I think that there's way too much of, oh, the way that I do this is right. Oh, the way that you do this is wrong. And, it's the classical, how many black belts does it take to screw in a light bulb? It takes 100, one to screw it in, 99 to tell you that you're doing it wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that if martial artists in general can work more towards unity and everybody trying to lift each other up instead of debating, that's not martial arts, this is martial arts, so on and so forth, then maybe we do see a future in which, like you mentioned, that the Olympics has a division that is martial arts, and then there's, XYZ divisions underneath that, whether that be Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu and Judo and sport karate and what have you, similarly to how you mentioned sailing, but also gymnastics. Floor routine is completely different looking from vault, is completely different from uneven bars. So it's been proven that you can make that type of a system work, and it can be effective, and it can, like you mentioned, Master Perez, follow the Olympic principles and be viewable, which I think is really important. The last topic that I want to get to here briefly, and this is once again just because I'm a sport martial arts guy, you mentioned earlier in the show talking about the flow system. If anybody listening was interested in that, you can check out the flowsystem.tv to get that weapons program featuring myself and Mackenzie Emery. But you even mentioned, Master Perez, that you're rather fond of point fighting and how it presents itself, and maybe the rules are a little bit better than what Taekwondo might currently have. So I just wanted to get your take first on point fighting as an Olympic Taekwondo competitor and gold medalist. What do you like about point fighting, maybe for any of our point fighting fans or fighters that are watching? And then also I want to talk about, with you implementing the flow system, what have you seen that be able to do for your students? Being a Taekwondo school, but also practicing a little bit of sport karate on the forms and weapons side, the type of impact that's had.
So, first let me go backwards first. I'll do flow first. And the reason is, as we were talking, I had come up with some different formats for competition. So when you talk about the Olympic thing, imagine if you had a team of fighters that went to the Olympics, and they had a guy who was good at judo, guy at jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, karate, and that was the team that competed in the martial arts, and they won a team medal. That's it. Or an individual. This was the old style of world championships. You had to break wood, you had to do this, you had to do forms. So you could have that same individual. For the flow system, for example, imagine if the flow system had one individual and you had to master 4 different disciplines like they do in gymnastics. I think that's an interesting conversation for later. With regard to the flow system, what we found as a school is we know what we're good at. We're good at kicking targets and people and teaching Olympic style fighting. And then we had a program called the Torch program that a bunch of schools around the country have used, and they became better at that training, which I think helped everyone. Prior to this, there was another individual that did a training program, and he had great success for different reasons. But your program, what we found was the format and the delivery of it enabled us to build a network of students and instructors. And the primary fear you have when you're an instructor is, I need to be the master of everything I teach. No, you don't. I go to my general practitioner. If I have a problem with my ankle, she sends me to an orthopod. And so I want her to send me to an expert. I don't want her to teach me something she doesn't know anything about or fix me. Dr. Heidi, I'm sorry. But with you, I think that's where you sat for us. And what I tell people is, I'm the Olympic champion, world champion in my sport. I went out and found the best world champion I could to teach you weapons. And that's why I like the flow system. It's true though. And so when we take your program, we're able to take it. I have my instructors sit in a room and watch your program, learn it, and review it before every class. I take the materials and give that to my students. Then the second thing we did, which I think everybody needs to do, is create an affiliate program and admit, I am not the expert in this, but I am a disciple of the expert. And I am going to use the expert to transfer this information to you and to my black belts. My black belts are actually better at BOSAF than I am. And I've made a promise to you I'm going to do a form at some point. So I will. But I have trouble with the comma stuff too, by the way. So with that said, that's the way to do it. And I think we did that with you. We're about to do it with Harinder Singh. I think he does an excellent job. This guy's a true martial artist. He believes what he says, and he does what he says. So he's not one of these guys that teach and not do it. So we're going to look at helping him, using him to help our black belts post black belt to this program. Your program, though, has been instrumental in retention, helping us build students that can actually do BOSAF correctly, learning performance skills, agility skills, concentration. At the end of the day, martial arts is simply this. If you learn to do this, that's a pretty good knife hand, actually, I didn't know. So I had learned this as a kid, and there's certain rules about it, and the Koreans change it every day. But once I learned this, I had an awareness of how my arm should be leveraged to my body and stuff like this, so that I'm not doing this, this, and this. This doesn't matter. Learning how to do it matters. The technique and the discipline is what matters. So when I'm learning one of your BOSAF skills, I'm learning the technique and the discipline to do it, as opposed to the skill itself, which has a value, but the real value is in the work product. And I think that's where your stuff comes across great. The last thing I'll say about it, because I don't want to keep on your bandwagon, but too long, is the way that you design the program. Anybody can turn it on and take 2 minutes to learn something. They don't have to sit through 45 minutes in a row. And that's the way you should teach. You need to teach a 2-minute segment, learn how to do it, go practice it, come back, move on to the next segment. And so I think it's the most well laid out program, the flow system in general. I look forward to the next module when you guys can get up to doing the next weapon. And then my kids have I have kids that come to the school carrying their BOSAF because it's the most exciting thing we do in the school. They're tired of kicking targets and me yelling at them about doing stuff, because the reality is, and this is why forms work. Forms work because there are people that don't want to get kicked in the face. They don't want to go to the gym and kick each other in the face. They don't want to get kicked in the face. They're not there for that. They're there to learn martial arts, get exercise, have fitness. Forms give you an ability unhindered to practice and show your level of excellence, and develop some really good technique and life skills. I'm terrible at forms. I'm horrible, the worst. I know them, I can do them because they were drilled into me, but I'm not a performer. So I have a lot of respect for form. Now, to move on to sport karate, I competed at a time when sport karate was there. And I was on a different track, but I was competing in these hybrid tournaments that were Tae Kwon Do point tournaments. And then I actually competed in a lot of the point tournaments against a lot of these really good competitors. And so I developed a lot of respect for what they did, timing-wise, technique-wise. Guys like Pedro Xavier, Christine Banyan, Rodriguez, and these guys that I knew and trained with. I trained with those guys at my camps. Amazing athletes and strong and fast. So you guys, the sport karate guys, are running into kind of a similar problem. So if you're a hammer, everything is a nail. So when you see a guy do this and you see a guy do a side kick, you know, they're going to score the hand because they're looking for the hand. The guy may be laying on the floor from the side. I've had situations where I've kicked guys back then and they're literally holding onto my leg and can't breathe. And they score the guy's punch in my arm. And I'm like, okay, as soon as he lets go of my leg, we'll start again. If you can get him off the floor, right? So I don't fault that or blame that. But as I watch some of these guys post these videos of you score it and you see kind of this, or the guy jumps over the top and does this. You know, the question I ask is this: if a guy jumps over the top of you, takes his knuckles and hits you on the top of the head, are you going to sleep? And if you're not, well, I don't know. I think we can all raise our game on our expectations. Or you make a decision. This is the game. In other words, it's a game of this. Here are the things where, like slap fighting when I was a kid, we had a game where we boxed but with slapping. It's a game. It's not meant to be real. It's a game. You can do this, you can do this, it scores, it's whatever. It's an interesting conversation. But these athletes, you know, that I'm seeing, there are point fighters that I could make into Olympians tomorrow. And quite frankly, the point fighters would be better than the current fighters because they have a better ability to do what's being scored in Olympic Taekwondo now. And the way Great Britain became successful at the Olympics, they went into the sport karate world and took those people out and put them in Taekwondo. So they literally did a nationwide search, found the point karate guys, and said, wow, these are the guys that can lift their legs up, travel with their bottom foot, and keep them up there for a long time. They can score 3 and 4 or 5 points. So, you know, and this is where Taekwondo has started to understand what I'm saying, and I want the point guys to understand what I'm saying, anybody. At no point do I blame an athlete for the technical regimen they're forced to compete under. I blame the administrators. And so when I moved into the administration, it was to improve that. The athletes, you just tell them to jump and how high, and they'll jump. They want to win. But they'll do nothing more or less than they have to do to win. So originally, and sport karate has some really amazing footwork. You watch some of these guys do what they do. And I think, you know, Jackson, what I would say in all that is, you know, John Hackelman called me the other day, and he said, we should do a clinic, your hook kick and my left hook. I said, yeah, let's do it. We'll call it the hook and the hook. He's like, why don't you train MMA fighters for kicking? And I said, you know, way back in the day, I thought about that. Like, I have a good friend who went on to train, he's a Taekwondo guy, Joe Kim. He's with the Patriots now. He's one of their defensive coaches, teaching them about how to use what he does to get guys not to be able to go forward or whatever. And way back, right after the Olympics, I was interviewed by the New York Giants, or New Jersey Giants at that point, the Medalist. And I didn't take it because I was in law school. I didn't want to get involved in that. I think there is something to be shared amongst us all. Like, I would go out and find the best point fighter coach if I really cared enough to win an Olympics for one of my guys and have him come coach my kid, because they're better at what these guys are trying to do than they are themselves. And I think the same can be said for everybody. Was all up, all surprised at this last MMA fight. The guy did a side kick, back kick. I've been doing that for 40 years. I'm like, that's not a surprise. That's what happens when you grab somebody's leg in Taekwondo. We climb up people's bodies and kick them. So everybody's like, oh, it's the most devastating KO in the history of UFC. I'm like, not really. I mean, that technique was created by the Japanese had a version of that 50 years ago. I learned it, and we all used it in competition the past 40, 45 years. So more of that cross knowledge needs to happen. And on the MMA thing, the last thing I'll say is these guys have figured out a way to hurt people in unique ways because they don't have any legal or illegal techniques except some. So when you have your hand like this, they call it dirty boxing, I guess. It's amazing. That's martial art. That's more martial art than Olympic Taekwondo is, because it's got damage potential, right?
Right. And after all, like what you're saying with the dirty boxing and some of that in close combat, you mentioned doing a program with Harinder Singh, who's a Jeet Kune Do specialist. I mean, a lot of people credit Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune Do for being the early form of what mixed martial arts would become, right? And so I think that there's definitely parallels there. And I think that the biggest take-home message from this entire conversation, which has been a very interesting one to get an Olympic Taekwondo gold medalist perspective on point fighting, is that ultimately the best thing for martial artists, whether you're fighting at a Taekwondo tournament or whether you're fighting at a sport karate tournament or wherever you're fighting at, whether it be UFC or otherwise, is that having some knowledge from many different styles and taking what's best from those styles. You mentioned something that I've never even thought of before. In Taekwondo, it's a lot of, you'll throw the round kick and then the leg will come down immediately followed by another. You'll do jump switching round kicks to the spin hook, but the feet are always coming down in between techniques. Whereas point fighters, you look at your Pedro Xaviers in the past era and the more modern era, you look at your Zolt Maratis and your Justin Ortizes and those type of characters, you see one leg in the air, kick, 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 kick over and over again, which under the scoring system that we're talking about with Taekwondo would probably score a lot of points if you're just always throwing that leg out, right? So again, very interesting conversation, and thank you for that. Before we go ahead and close things up here, do you have any closing thoughts or comments for our audience?
I think that, I think we all have to remember who we are, where we came from, and who we are becoming. So as a young Puerto Rican, Polish kid in New York and New Jersey getting chased around my city by Italian kids and black kids, I decided I was going to wander into a martial arts school for self-defense. I never believed I'd have anything to teach because I didn't think I was good enough. And then I realized what I had to offer and teach, and that's what I teach. But I'm an 8th Dan Kukiwan now, and somewhere along the way, I guess I became me, the master, the grandmaster, whatever it is. And I think we have to take that responsibility seriously. We have to realize and remember that we're martial artists. We need to be role models. Most recently I was embroiled in this political nonsense in my joke of a city, and I was on the council for 8 years. And I stood my ground as who I am. That's it. Deal with what you want to do. And I take the consequences one way or the other. I had a good 8 years here. But I did it as a martial artist. I'm a man of principle. We had a criminal and a crook in our city, and I held him accountable. And I won't mention his name, Sanjay Gahani. He violated the Brown Act trying to get his own money for his own personal good to the detriment of our beautiful city. So I stood and fought for that. That's what martial arts do. We fight for what we believe in. I believe the scoring system in Olympic Taekwondo is terrible. I will continue to fight that fight and talk that talk. Cho's got to go. That needs to be a t-shirt. When it comes to what we all do, though, what I was trying to say is we now become, in the platonic sense, the republic. I'm at a point where I was a student. I was a warrior athlete. I was a soldier, for lack of a better word. I was then a teacher. And then I'm now at the place where I'm supposed to be the torchbearer. I'm supposed to be the guy carrying the knowledge forward. And I take that seriously. And I think we all need to take that more seriously. One thing I don't do, though, is I don't take myself that seriously. So I don't get a belt with a red stripe or a white stripe or whatever that everybody's complaining about. And you don't have to call me the Grand Poop Bob or anything. I think that I'm a coach. I'm a decent coach. I wish there were a better name for what we do. I'm not sure Master or Grandmaster is a great name for it. I think what we are mentors, and there's probably a better name for it. I hesitate to find some of those names because I just watched that Netflix special on HBO on the Nexium cult guy who called himself the Vanguard or whatever. So, you know, you got to be careful with this. You can't take yourself too seriously, but I never do. We are physical coaches who, because of what we do physically, manifest ourselves in an intellectual self and in a spiritual self, meaning Chungshin Muril, which is mind and spirit, body together, not religious. And we persevere, we use our determination and our patience to achieve our goals, and that's our goal. With regard to one person you mentioned, which I think is important to mention, is Harinda. This is a gentleman who took, like you said you should, various parts of different martial arts, and he's a Bruce Lee aficionado and student of the theory, and put them together to make a system that works. You know, when I went up to his place and when he was in the area up in Palo Alto, he's a talented martial artist. I mean, this is a guy, I don't do jujitsu, but I'm not a weak guy. I couldn't get this guy from stopping to grapple me into grapple hell. And, you know, I can out kick most guys, so I'm not worried about that. But, you know, he's a good kicker. He's good hands, good understanding. And he has taken some of that. So when you say Bruce Lee was the original guy to think about it, he absolutely was. And I wasn't a fan, as I've told you before, of people that I should be fans of. I'm a musician. I wasn't a fan of the popular bands at the time, but I've come back to reappreciate them. So I would encourage everyone to go out and read the Tao of Jeet Kune Do and find the commonalities in your fighting strategy that you have from, because I found a lot in what I do from that. And I think when we don't do that, I think that's a disservice to ourselves. And I think that's ultimately the message I think I would leave everybody with is, you know, reinvest in yourself, figure out what it is that you need to do that matters, figure out what you do that matters, and then do more of it. But don't be afraid to learn. So I'm always learning. Like right now, you know, I'm like you and everybody else, we're all doing these online kind of things. I'm dissatisfied with the state of affairs of the online stuff. So I'm wondering what the next incarnation of that is and how do I teach my class better remotely, or can I? And I think there's a combination of things out there that, you know, you and I have spoke about that we can do better. Because I think we're going to be in this world for a while longer. I think that's our next biggest challenge is how do we continue to do something that's best done in person remotely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. That was an excellent summary and so many great nuggets there. So anybody that's tuning into this podcast later on in the broadcast, definitely go ahead, rewind this. There's all types of great information. Master Perez mentioned the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. There's actually a special edition version of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do available on the Black Belt Magazine website right now. So head on over to blackbeltmag.com, click on the little shopping cart. You can search Tao of Jeet Kune Do. There's a special limited edition that you can purchase right now on the website.
I want you, as soon as we're done with this podcast, I want you to go back to David, go and tell him to send me one. And he better not charge me.
Yes, sir, will do. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm here at Century Wealth headquarters. They're a friend of the podcast and a friend.
Pay for it is money well spent.
Yes, sir. So once again, Master Perez, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an excellent time, and I've really enjoyed it, and I've learned a ton. And thank you to our audience that has tuned in. Like I just said, if you're tuning in towards the end, rewind this, watch the whole thing on your drives to work or while you're on the treadmill or whatever it may be. Make sure you give this a listen because some excellent insights from gold medalist, world champion, legendary martial artist, Master Herb Perez.
Too many kind words. Thank you for having me. And I wish everybody, including you, the best on your martial art journey.
Thank you very much. And as for me, this has been the Jax Rudolph Podcast, episode number 42. and I'll see you next time.